Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 20th of September, 2022. Right, everyone, let's get into it. So the SEC has charged, or the SEC has charged Ian Bellina for promoting unregistered ICOs. Now, for those of you who were around during 2017 and 2018, Ian Bellina was pretty popular, had a pretty big following, and had this kind of spreadsheet with all these ICOs listed in them that he would promote on his YouTube channel, on his Twitter, and everything like that. And he wouldn't, I don't think most of the time he would disclose that he was getting kickbacks for promoting this. He was getting tokens paid out to him and things like that. So all round, just a bit of a grifter, probably pretty much just like a scammer if I had to go that far. But the SEC has finally gone after him and is charging him with promoting unregistered ICOs. Yeah, so, I put out a tweet where I said, finally this happened, and then this is what the SEC should be doing, going after actual bad actors in crypto and not going after the honest builders. But then James Hancock here replied and said there is kind of a point in the filing that says that I guess kind of makes a weird argument. I'll read it out. So it says the US-based investors in Bellina's pool irrevocably committed to the transaction when, from within the United States, they sent their ETH contributions to Bellina's pool. At that point, their ETH contributions were validated by a network of nodes on the Ethereum blockchain, which are clustered more densely in the United States than any other country. As a result, those transactions took place in the United States. So this is really weird and bizarre and doesn't make any sense, because essentially what the SEC is saying here is that the SEC has complete dominion over the Ethereum network, right? And all Ethereum network transactions happen in the US. Now, obviously that's not true. Obviously that's not how this network works. And also less than 50% of the nodes are actually based in the US. So he's not even right about that, or the SEC isn't even right about that. But this is a very dangerous thing. Like, if this actually becomes precedent and this actually is part of the filing and actually goes forward and goes into the records, they can use this in the future if they wanted to. This is a massive power grab right here with just this statement, and they've buried it as number 69 here on the points that they have in the filing, which is obviously very far down the list. But it basically states, if I'm reading it correctly, which I think I am, that the SEC believes that as long as you're making a transaction on the Ethereum network, you are basically transacting using infrastructure that's located in the United States, and all Ethereum transactions happen within the United States, which obviously isn't correct. As I said, I think this is insane. I really hate this because the fact of the matter is, as I said, I like that the fact that the SEC is actually going after the people that they should be going after, but then they're trying to shoehorn this crap into it, which just is kind of, like I said, rugged again by the SEC, which is just ridiculous. I think just generally, and I've talked about it a lot, Gary Gensler and the SEC, they're trying to power grab wherever they can. They're a lot of bark with very little bite, though. And I was talking about this in the Discord channel today, but it seems like, from my reading, that Ripple and the SEC are not, or Ripple Labs, I should say, and the SEC are not actually going to go to court. They're going to settle out of court, and it's probably going to happen relatively soon. Now, if I had to give my own assumption of what would happen here, I think that Ripple Labs is probably going to admit that at the time that they sold and created XRP, it was a security, but it is no longer a security, and they're going to pay a fine for that initial unregistered securities offering, and they're not going to admit any wrongdoing, right? Basically the EOS treatment, because this is what happened with EOS. Now, if the SEC can't even get Ripple, right, can't even get XRP, which in my mind is one of the most obvious securities in crypto. If you were to make an argument that a crypto is a security, I would say XRP is pretty obviously one. Then how is the SEC going to get anything else, especially ETH? Like, people are always talking about, there's a risk that ETH's going to be labeled as security because of comments from Gary Gensler and the SEC generally. And as I said, they just seem to have a lot of bark and very little bite. They seem to be trying to power grab, but they seem to be failing at actually using any of the power that they seemingly think they have. So it's just bizarre when I kind of look at that and look at people's arguments, and it really is just disappointing that the SEC has become such a clown show, because as much as I don't really think that financial regulations, I'm against a lot of different financial regulations, I still think that there should be a body that holds people responsible if they're literally scamming people or committing fraud. Like, obviously I want criminals to be punished, right? But I don't want the bodies that are responsible for punishing criminals making everyone feel like a criminal and making everyone feel like they have to over comply, like we saw with the OFAC sanctions for Tornado Cash, right? Like everyone felt like they had to over comply on things. That's not good regulation. That's basically, I mean, maybe the US or the nation state would consider that to be good regulation because they basically get, I guess, like control over certain aspects of an industry for free. They don't have to legislate for it or anything like that. And actually on the Ripple note as well, I did want to make a note here. The reason why I think that it's not going to go to court is because if the SEC was to lose that case in court, it's even worse for them. It basically sets a precedent, which means that if they lose, there is probably 0% chance that they'd ever be able to classify anything as a security within crypto, which is obviously not what they want. Now, I'm not a legal expert, so don't take what I'm saying as gospel, but from my understanding, from my reading, like, you only go to court if you think you're going to win, like in the legal system. And the SEC obviously doesn't want to risk it at all. Ripple obviously has a lot of money to spend on lawyers, and those lawyers are probably doing their job, right? And as much as it pains me to say it, this is good for all of crypto. Like, I honestly think Ripple and XRP are pretty much a scam, and people flame me for that opinion, whatever. Maybe I'll get some reply guys on YouTube here. But generally, them winning against the SEC will just defang the SEC a lot and make it a lot harder for them to go after other things. Not that I think that there was any risk that they'd be able to label Ether security, but just in general, I think that as it currently stands, the SEC is the biggest joke of an institution in the, I guess, like regulatory environment in the US. Gary Gensler needs to be fired, essentially. He's not doing a good job at all. I don't know how anyone could argue that he's doing a good job, unless your definition of a good job is doing things that appease certain people over others. That's, I guess, venturing into a different discussion. But this latest filing is just ridiculous. Like, there's no way in hell you can argue that every transaction that happens on the Ethereum network, is jurisdiction of the SEC. That doesn't work like that. And then the fact that they're trying to push this just shows that they are really trying to grab as much power as they can. And I don't think they're going to succeed with that. But yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about on that front. On to some more, I guess, positive news from the last 24 hours. So, there's been a lot of discussion about validator withdrawals or beacon chain withdrawals or staking withdrawals since the merge happened. And for good reason. I mean, even before the merge happened, there was a lot of discussion around this. For good reason. We want to close that loop. We want people to be able to exit from staking, not just by selling off STETH or RETH, for example, or any other LSD, but also withdraw their ETH from the beacon chain and also withdraw their rewards, right? They can only get the fees right now. They can't withdraw their block rewards. But we also want that too. And there's been a bit of discussion about like whether this is going to be included in the next network upgrade, which is codenamed Shanghai, and people have been doubting that it's going to be included. Well, I don't think so. I mean, as Preston Van Loon says here, validator withdrawals are considered for inclusion in the Shanghai upgrade. I believe this is an important feature that ought to be in the soonest practical upgrade. And there has been a social contract in place for a long time now that withdrawals would come in the Shanghai upgrade, or at least be highly considered to be included in that upgrade, which is obviously the first one after the merge. And you can see here that the specification for withdrawals is pretty much nearing completion, and it's actually relatively simple to implement this. It's not a difficult thing to do. So once the spec is actually completed and finalized, then the client developers can start implementing it. And then from there, obviously, we do the coordination dance. We see what else we want to do, and what other EIPs we want to include in the Shanghai update, and then it goes live. As I've said before, I think that we could expect this in late Q1, probably Q2-ish. I don't imagine it happening in early Q1, because if you think about timelines here, the next, I guess, like few weeks, the core devs are going to be, I guess they're still going to be working on stuff in the background, but not as much. And then we've got DevCon, which is obviously going to take up a bunch of time in October. Then we're nearing the holiday period and things like that. So, and it takes a while to get these things done. Like, it's not something that can happen overnight. So if I had to be generous, I would say late Q1, but I'm more expecting a Q2 kind of release here, which is still fine. I mean, that's in that 6 to 12 month window that people have been quoting. And as I said, withdrawals themselves are relatively simple. And the decision could be made that we just ship withdrawals as its own hard fork. We don't have to put anything else into it. We just do withdrawals, and then If the other stuff isn't ready yet, we just do it in another hard fork later on, which I think would actually be the better way of doing things, because as I've said plenty of times, withdrawals are critical. I believe that they should happen as soon as possible. We shouldn't be delaying it, which I haven't seen any indication of any delays or anything like that. But I think that the core researchers, developers, people part of that environment completely understand this and want it just as bad as everyone else wants it. And I mean, personally, like, I don't care. Like, people say, oh, it's going to lead to a dump in price because all this ETH is unlocking. I mean, that shouldn't determine what we put or don't put into the network. It shouldn't have anything to do with markets, as I've mentioned before. And I honestly don't think it will lead to much of a sell-off. I think what's going to happen is that great reshuffling I've been talking about. Multiple people have signaled either publicly on Twitter or messaged me saying that they originally staked with a centralized provider because it was much easier. Rocket Pool wasn't live, right? Lido wasn't even live. And now they're like, well, I want to actually exit that position, but maybe they're staking with Coinbase. They don't want to take the massive haircut on their ETH. They'd rather just wait, but they really want to exit. And there's also people who have stacked enough ETH to become a solo staker that want to exit whoever they've staked with previously and stake as a solo kind of staker there. So when you look at it like that, you can see that it's not just going to be people are going to withdraw their stake, which obviously goes into a queue. It's not going to all be withdrawn at once and just market dump their ETH. There's obviously going to be some of that, and people are probably going to sell some rewards, especially for tax purposes. But generally, I don't think that should dictate anything around withdrawals. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to them going live, and we can still expect them in the next upgrade, next hard fork / network upgrade that goes live on Ethereum. All right, so speaking of staking, Marceau here from the Rocket Pool community put out a great thread today, started off by saying, did you know that running an Ethereum validator has a total of 5 revenue streams, or 7 if running with Rocket Pool? So he breaks them all down here by saying, category 1, you have beacon chain rewards. You get rewarded for attestations, for proposals, and for sync committees. That's just the normal rewards that you will all see popping up if you're a solo validator. If you're running your own validator, you'll see those popping up. Category 2, which is execution rewards. So this is new with the merge, obviously. Tips, which is the unburned fee revenue, and MEV, which is the minor extractable value or maximal extractable value that you can get from running things like MEV boost. And category 3 is Rocket Pool rewards. So there is commission and RPL rewards as part of Rocket Pool staking. So you get even more rewards on top of solo staking. I know people have talked about this a lot in the Discord channel, and I've talked about it on YouTube before, but those are the kind of rewards that you get for staking on the beacon chain. And it's very tempting to go with Rocket Pool, right, when you get those extra rewards there. And as I've said previously, I'm still in the process of spinning up my Rocket Pool, mini pool, and getting all that out there. And I think that those extra rewards are very juicy for people. And I think that they've done that obviously on purpose and in a very targeted way in order to get people onboarded to Rocket Pool. Because at the end of the day, for me, it goes like Ethereum solo staking in terms of, I guess, where I'd first stake my ETH. Then it would be Rocket Pool. And then after that, I mean, it'd be kind of hard for me to choose. I would have to say right now, it'd probably be Lido, because after that, it just gets pretty much every other solution from there is centralized, right? There's just like solo staking, then Rocket Pool, then centralized solutions. So right now, I'd pick Lido just because they've been around for so long, and they're probably one of the best centralized solutions out there. And then after that, it'd just be centralized exchanges, be Coinbase or Kraken, really. So you can see we obviously need a lot more of these things coming online, a lot more of these decentralized staking pools coming online, but we still have a very robust one with Rocket Pool, and a very great one, which has a great community. If you have any troubles, you can go into the Discord channel, ask in there. They'll help you out. And they're also still a very small part of the network. So there's no risk of you, I guess, like increasing their share of the network so much that it becomes toxic. There's none of that, right? They're still a very small percentage. And we obviously want to get them as high as we can, but still under that threshold that I kind of mentioned yesterday of 10%. Now, that was just a random threshold that I came up with. In an ideal world, it would probably be less than that. But like, there is kind of like those, I guess, points that we don't want to see things at. Like 33%, for example, we don't want to see anything above 33%, like at all. Like that is one of the key pivotal zones. And obviously the worst case scenario would be any one entity or even a group of entities above 66%, because that's the finalization threshold. But if you think about it, 10% or even maybe 15% on the higher end of things isn't extremely bad, but it's still not great. So under 10% is fine in terms of I think, single entities on the network, but we need to work as hard as we can to get that even lower. And not all entities are created equal either. I think you can actually apply different percentages to different entities. For example, if 30% of the network was solo staking, I would have no issue with that, right? Because solo staking is not just one monolithic entity. It is, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of different entities of different people in individuals and things like that doing their own solo staking. Now, obviously, it's very hard to know how much of the network is an actual solo staker, because you don't want, like, the people who don't want to be found won't be found, and fingerprinting them is quite difficult, even if they haven't hidden themselves. But then things like centralized staking, we don't want that anywhere near 30%, right? We don't want it anywhere near 20%. We want it like 10% or less, ideally. And in an ideal world, it'd be 5%. But then decentralized staking pools, you can probably have that higher than 5%, and pretty safely, 10, 15% might be fine, right? So I'm not meaning to imply that all of them are created equal. There are definitely different thresholds, but and obviously solo staking is the gold standard in terms of thresholds, but generally, I think, you just got to look at it as, we don't want any one party having anywhere close to 20 or 30% besides solo stakers. But as I said, solo stakers are hard to fingerprint. That's why you see them listed as other in I guess, like those beacon chain charts that you see for stake distribution. But even other doesn't necessarily mean solo staker. It could mean anything, really. But it's assumed that it's solo staker, right? But yeah, anyway, enough on that topic. I got a bunch of other things to get through before I run out of time today. So Giulio here posted another tweet about Verkle trees, or the Verge. So Giulio says, I just prototyped the Verge transition at ETH Berlin on Aragon. Will fuzz it, but I could not manage to break it manually so far. You won't be able to be syncing from scratch for now, but the switch happened flawlessly. So the Verge is one of those next, I guess, roadmap items that are going to be executed on over the coming years, along with the Surge and all those other ones that you've heard of. And if you want to know all about the Verge, actually, this is a perfect segue into a blog post, or I guess like a newsletter that Himesh put out today, which is part 2 of his After the Merge Substack series, which is all about the Verge. So this post explains what Merkle trees and proofs are, how Verkle trees and proofs improve upon them, and the statelessness implications for full nodes. So I obviously highly recommend giving this thing a read here. But there's also a little teaser from Giulio here, who works as a core developer on Geth at the Ethereum Foundation, about the smell of new Verkle testnet coming up soon. So the work is continuing on these, these roadmap items after the merge, not just on the Surge related stuff like proto-dank sharding, but also on Verkle trees, which are very important. But as I said, I recommend you read this blog post / newsletter to get the full lowdown of that and dive deeper into the Verge, because I think the Verge is probably, in terms of like near-term-ish roadmap items, the Verge is definitely there, and it's probably one of the most least understood more widely. Obviously, when it comes to sharding and things like that, and proto-dank sharding, I think that's better understood because it's been talked about longer, but I'm going to try my best to talk about the Verge more and point you towards ways to get yourself educated, because it is definitely just as important for the Ethereum roadmap. That's why it's a major item on the roadmap, right? So go give these a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But good to see both a Go Ethereum developer or Geth developer and an Aragon developer working on Verkle trees here. All right, so Varun from Stanford here, actually he works on research at Chapter 1, which is a crypto fund, but he went to Stanford, Stanford University here, put out a thread saying, zero-knowledge proofs will revolutionize how we think about privacy and scaling computation, and they're just starting to take off. Don't want to get left behind? Here's a quick primer just for you. So just another thread to check out, to, I guess, like, get the lowdown on zero-knowledge proofs when it comes to privacy and scaling. Highly recommend the thread. I mean, even if you understand zero-knowledge proofs, it's probably still worth the read just to see if you're missing anything. So I'll link that in the YouTube description below for you to check out. And speaking of threads to check out, there's another one here from Haym, who is a recommended follow at this point, I think. He or she, I don't know who they are doing a lot of really great threads around Ethereum generally over the past few weeks, and I've highlighted some of them on the refuel already. Well, today's thread is all about EigenLayer, or EigenLayer, I don't know how to pronounce that exactly, and about how it will extend ETH to provide generic extendable trust. And I think Polynar's talked a lot about these guys before as well, so you can definitely check out this thread for a lowdown on them. It's a 24 tweet thread, so a bit longer than your usual thread, but not too long. And obviously, if you've been reading Haym's previous threads, you'll know that this one's a goodie as well. So I'll link that in the YouTube description for you to check out. All right, some news out of Galleon today. So, following the passing of Galleon Improvement Proposal 7, the carpenters have blistered their hands deploying upgrades. So, Arbitrum cannons are on deck and Optimism cannons are on deck, and the set protocol fork is now deployed and the product roadmap is unlocked. So, a lot of updates here on the Galleon side of things, as you can check out in this blog post. So, Arbitrum and Optimism deployments are done, I believe, here, and there's also a little what's next section around what's coming up on the roadmap. So, you can check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But good to see another team just building through the bear market. Like, that's what it's all about right now. And you guys know I'm an angel investor in Galleon as well, so I should just disclose that there. But I'm an angel investor in them because Andrew Wilkinson here, the founder of Galleon, he was at set, and I have been friends with him for quite a while, and he just knows what he's doing when it comes to structured products and it comes to what people want within DeFi, and I think what he's building with Galleon is really awesome. So you should definitely go check that out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so speaking of new deployments, 0x's API is now live on Arbitrum. So if you're a developer, you can now tap into 0x API for aggregated liquidity and smart order routing with best executed prices, deep liquidity, 99.9% uptime, and uber fast response times. So you can check out this blog post for full details on this. But obviously, this is one for the developers out there. But cool to see this is live on Arbitrum because developers will tap into this and then users will get, value out of this 0x integration on Arbitrum. So I'll link in the YouTube description for the developers out there to check out. So an announcement out of ENS today. So ENS and Coinbase have teamed up. So aligned with ENS's mission to make Web3 more accessible, we partnered with Coinbase to create CBID usernames, a free-to-claim Web3 username. Existing .eth addresses can connect existing names to seamlessly transact and build out your Web3 digital identity. So I think you might have seen these before, these CBID kind of identities that you can get through Coinbase. Which is running on ENS. So it's not a .eth, but it's like a .id, I believe. So you can basically have like sassel.id instead of sassel.eth, for example, which I think is really cool. Like, obviously, I would have preferred it to be .eth on the front end, but it's still tied to the same address because you can have like many of these things tied to the same address. But .id, I guess, just makes sense from Coinbase's side of things because Coinbase wants to be relatively neutral probably towards these networks, even though I think that Coinbase is doing a lot of great work for Ethereum and its layer 2 ecosystem as well. And they're doing a lot of really cool stuff in their Coinbase wallet with the DeFi integrations. I guess like it makes sense for them to do a .id rather than a .eth on their front end for their users, so they can basically not confuse their users, so to speak. And then anyone who wants to dive a bit deeper can just see, oh, okay, well, it's .eth under the hood, go get their .eth name and things like that as well, and play around on chain with DeFi too. So very cool to see this partnership, just ENS kicking more goals here, and Coinbase doing some more great things within the Ethereum community. All right, so a fresh blog post out of Li.Fi today. So this one is called Navigating Arbitrary Messaging Bridges, a Comparison Framework. So bridges, I haven't talked about them in a little while, but they're still as important as ever. And I just saw before, and I forgot to include it, that there was a critical bug, I believe, in the Arbitrum bridge and it got introduced after Nitro was deployed from L1 to L2. And as I've said to you guys before, just because a bridge is like an L2 bridge doesn't mean it's any more inherently secure than a cross-chain bridge, right? Like from a bug perspective, from like a smart contract perspective, there are crypto economic designs and architectures that are more exploitable for cross-chain bridges than they are for the L2 stuff. But this was a bug in the actual contract. Now, as I've also said before, the contracts are the L2s at the end of the day. The bridge contract is basically the L2 because that's where all the assets are stored. They're still stored on Ethereum layer 1. You basically get this IOU on layer 2, right? So, and this thing that kind of represents what's in that layer 1 bridge. So I think with this exploit, it was found and patched and everything by a white hack. But I think with this exploit, what could have happened is that funds could have been drained out of the L1 bridge contract, which would have left the funds on L2 without anything backing them. And it would have led to a bit of chaos there, or maybe a lot of chaos. So it's still very important to keep in mind that just because something is an L2 and you're bridging to an L2 doesn't inherently make it more secure against bugs in the contract than if you were to bridge to a side chain or another L1. Because at the end of the day, you're putting money into a smart contract. It's the same thing with like DeFi and other smart contracts out there. You need to be aware that there's risks with that. So that's why I think that I wanted to highlight this blog post as well, which is actually quite a lengthy read. It's a 44-minute read, but it's got a massive comparison framework over these arbitrary messaging bridges, which are, I think, one of the more popular bridges out there. There's things like Axelar, Layer 0, Nomad, Wormhole. So both Nomad and Wormhole have been hacked previously, right, with massive hacks. I believe Nomad's was 190 million, Wormhole was like 300 million or something. And then there's other ones as well that I don't believe have been hacked yet. Maybe they will in the future. But you should definitely give this post a read to understand how all of these things work, how they differ, what kind of security assumptions there are, and all those sorts of things. As I said, it is a long, beefy read. I haven't read it yet. It's just too long for me to fit in over the past couple of days or since it was published, but I do plan to get to it. Hopefully, maybe over the weekend when I've got some more time. But I think it's definitely well worth the read because I've read the blog post that they've put out before, that Li.Fi have been putting out before, and they're usually very good. So I'll link this in the YouTube description for you to check out. All right, so Liam here has a new newsletter called the Layer 2 Weekly Roundup. So this is going to be a weekly newsletter covering, which covers the latest and most important updates from within Ethereum's Layer 2 ecosystem. So if you're interested in keeping up to date with Layer 2s, well, this is what you should be subscribed to. It's just a bunch of, I guess, a collection of resources here with a bunch of dot points and updates all around L2s across the entire ecosystem. And I think it's very, very useful. I think, I used to do this for I think like set when I was doing like these weekly DeFi newsletters, and it was basically just like a roundup, right, where people could go in, find some resources, go get educated on things, keep up to date with things. And I think these are very valuable. So I'll link Liam's new newsletter in the YouTube description below. You can go give it a subscribe, and also give Liam a follow. He does a lot of great threads around Layer 2s and just Ethereum in general. Definitely worthy follow. So I'll link that in the YouTube description as well for you. All right, last up, just a quick shout out that there's only a few days left in the current Gitcoin grant round, so you should definitely go donate to your favorite Gitcoin grants, and one of those should be the Protocol Guild, which, a refresher for you guys, is a collective of 119 Ethereum Core Protocol contributors, and they're getting paid with all your donations. So you'll be directly contributing to the future of the Ethereum Core Protocol by donating to the Protocol Guild. But as I said, don't just donate to the Protocol Guild, you can also donate to any of your favorite projects on Gitcoin for the last few days of this grants round, which actually finishes in a couple of days. Yeah, the 22nd, I believe it finishes. So it's a couple of days from now. So go do it. I don't think I've done it yet. Actually, yeah, wow. I just reminded myself I've got to go do mine. So I'm going to go do that. But yeah, definitely go do that. But I think that's going to be it for today. I just wanted to make a quick comment. Hopefully the audio issues are better. I know in the past I've had a lot of issues around popping. So whenever I said P's, it would like really pop and it would get annoying. And there was different like volume issues and things like that. I changed my mic and like fiddled with the whole setup, and it seems to be a lot better now. So if there are still issues, please let me know. But I think I finally like ironed it all out. So yeah, hopefully it's all good there. But on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.